Before we get started here, just a quick note. After the last episode with Izel Reese, my wife was complaining about the background here. She thought it was too many printers and whatnot, so I've gone ahead and moved the printers out, put some books in there that hopefully look a little bit better. There's Pearl Jam books, one on Seinfeld, a book, Dave Grohl's book is back there. I've read some of them, not all of them. I'm hoping to read all of them at some point, but hopefully it's a little bit better to look at than the printers were. Today, I'm talking to Justin Iverson, who is a third generation cattle rancher from Montana. Had a really interesting conversation with him about life on the ranch. For many years, he actually moved away from the ranch after growing up there as a kid, worked in corporate America, and then came back about 12 years ago. He talked all about raising cattle, beef cattle, and all the crazy cold weather they get out there. It gets like, just in December, it was minus 49 degrees. So we talked all about that, how it works. I also asked him about, was really interested in what he thinks of Yellowstone and how much is dramatized there and how much is actually real in terms of what it's really like to run a ranch out in Montana. So here he is, Justin Iverson. Let me ask you, just to start, Montana's been in the news all for the last week or so because of the flyovers, the big Chinese balloon. Did you get a glimpse of the balloon when it was flying over?
I did not. Apparently it did fly somewhat close to us. It kind of came down the Continental Divide and then went east and ended up over in Billings. But it had passed through Billings before I'd even heard about it. So I missed it entirely. But it sounds like I might have more chances. They've been catching a few more coming through.
Yeah, I mean, just the other night they had closed down the airspace over Montana. I'm not sure which part of Montana.
Right.
And I think, are you east of Billings? Is that where you...
I'm west of Billings.
Are you west of Billings?
Far western side of the state, closer to Idaho than really anything. Honestly, air miles, I'm probably 30 miles from Idaho.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I think it was airspace over by Havre, north central Montana. Was shut. Yeah.
And what do you think about that? Does it make you feel uneasy at all that first of all, the Chinese spy balloon and then the other stuff that is sort of unidentified at this point?
It doesn't bother me that much because we live with spy satellites. We just don't see them, right? Yeah. So when you start seeing it out there, I think some people start getting nervous. No, I'm not terribly nervous. You can get on Google Maps and get a really good look at our place. Yeah. I'm not terribly worried about it. No.
Not concerned about the Chinese people stealing your ranching techniques. I mean,
no. If matter of fact, if they want to start using more of our techniques, that would be great. Or some of our soil conservation work and water conservation work, absolutely, they can do that.
Yeah, well, China has a serious problem with that. They have not a lot of good farmland, I believe, right?
Right, absolutely. That's why they're purchasing so much food abroad.
Right, I think
you want to feed that many people.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually read a story in the New York Times the other day. I'm not sure if you saw this. I'll send it to you if you didn't. But China is now experimenting with these high-rise pig farms. Have you seen this?
Wow.
Like 30-story buildings, right? Where the pigs, each floor is like a different stage of the pig's life. So the pig is born on the first floor, and then as they get older, they go up. And the whole thing is monitored with cameras, like HD cameras, and it's like a command center, and I guess some people don't think it's that safe of a way to raise pigs, but they just don't have the farmland, I guess, to do it. The first one opened, maybe I think it was August of 2022, and they've got maybe 3 or 4 open and several others being built.
Right.
But
they have some real concern with swine flu going on. So I could see where if they can keep the animals contained in one particular facility, biosecurity wise, maybe they can keep them from becoming ill. That's probably a benefit behind it, but that's interesting. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, I'll send you the story. It's interesting. A lot of good pictures and everything, what it looks like inside. I mean, they're massive buildings. They look like giant apartment buildings from the outside.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you could never do that with cows, though, right? The pigs, they don't need a lot of room to run around, but a cow needs
a cow needs some ground. Yeah, for sure. Depending on their stage in life and what you're trying to accomplish, you try to have some ground they can move around. It seems to be a little healthier for them.
Yeah,
absolutely. I do know folks who may bring them in for short periods of time during bad weather. They'll barn them up and bring them in for calving or whatever it is. But then you have a waste issue. You have a problem getting inputs coming in, getting water and feed, but then you got to be able to clean it while they're in there and get it cleaned out. So that's something we would have to really invest in some sort of infrastructure to make it work. And in reality, we can keep them outside just fine.
And how much room do they need, the cows? Like on your, let's say on your ranch, how many acres are we talking about?
Well, I guess it depends. Right now, we're feeding 170 cows in a 20-acre pasture, and that's just fine for right now. When we're talking summer grazing, they need a lot more room to be able to go out and graze and find food and have access to water. So most of our cattle stay on summer pasture around here, and we're giving them 5 to 10 acres at a time for 2 or 3 days, and then we're rotating them to the next small piece of ground. So there isn't a very specific number of acres per cow. It's more tonnage of feed per cow. So around here, we have a much denser food supply. I mean, they don't have to go very far to get a mouthful of feed. You get over to eastern Montana, they may have to travel a couple of miles to find water between where they're feeding and where they're drinking. So they need much more acreage per cow. You might be talking 100 acres per cow. You get down Nevada country and they're up in the high desert, it's thousands of acres. They really spread out. So it's different here. We have smaller ranches in this area, but there's more food available per acre.
Yeah. And during the winter time, you're feeding them more, you're giving them food more than they're going out and finding?
Yeah, so we get enough snow that we have to provide feed for them in the wintertime. They're grazing through the summer and into the fall as long as we can before the snow gets too deep. But because of the snow level we have here in the mountains, we do have to provide feed for them. So we have fields that we rotate between grazing and haying. That if the cows aren't eating it that summer, that's the hay that we're collecting, putting up for the wintertime feeding. So we'll stockpile that in large round bales, 1,400-pound bales, and have them in a stack. And then like this morning, we pick up 4 or 5 of those and take them out every morning and unroll them for the cows. And that accomplishes a couple things. One, it gives them feed, but 2, we're using that organic material to go back into the soil to help replenish our soil profile, getting the organic matter back in there so we have a healthier ground to work on. So getting that manure, getting that feed back out there is important to us.
That's interesting. So it's sort of a cycle of life. And is eating that, I assume eating that hay is healthy for them, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We get the hay tested for protein content and roughage content, carbohydrates.
Really?
And we're constantly every day going out and just checking on the body condition of the cows, making sure they're not getting thin, we're not getting over fat. You don't want them overfed. Right now, those cows have a calf inside them that they're raising. So we need plenty of good feed for those cattle. But you can adjust that. When it's colder, you feed more. When it's warmer, you feed a little bit less. Now, come spring, we'll try to get them out in some pasture ground and eat some of that fresh green grass. They'll be sick of dry hay. But come fall, they're ready for hay again. And we feed a combination of grass and alfalfa. That's what grows well in our soil type. And so the cows do really well on that.
And so I was going to ask you, when they get out, that's what they eat, grass? They're actually grass-fed cows? Yeah.
Yeah, the summertime they're grazing on these high mountain grasses that are super high in protein and super nutritious for them. That's what they're on primarily. But like I said, because of our soil type, we can grow better and more alfalfa on particularly the home place because the soil profile. It grows grass, absolutely does, but we can do better with our soils with alfalfa. Now, the property that we hay down the lower part of the valley, that just grows straight grass. There's a number of grasses in there: orchard grass, timothy, Garrison meadow foxtail. There's a bunch of different things, canary reed grass, whatever grows, they'll eat.
Do you feed them corn at all? Because I know there's a lot of corn-fed stuff, and I don't know the controversy, or if there even is a controversy, but I've heard like grass-fed versus corn-fed. Like I'll see it on the label sometimes,
Right. So corn doesn't grow in our area, so it would be expensive for us to truck in corn and feed those cows. Corn is generally used when they are either finishing cattle pre-slaughter, where they're trying to get them to gain weight and build marbling. They're increasing caloric intake. They'll use corn for that, or they have corn silage. They'll chop the whole plant. and that's just kind of a different stage. So what I mean about stages, so our ranch is in the industry, it's called a commercial cow-calf operation. So we have a group of mother cows that we keep through the years that give us a crop of calves every year. They're bred in June, they calve in March, and those calves stay with their mothers until they're weaned in November, and then we sell those calves and they go away. They go to generally the Midwest. Lately, it's been Nebraska.
So you said they go to Nebraska and then they continue growing up there, and
correct.
The next stage.
Yes. So somebody buys them and they go to the Midwest. And the reason they go to the Midwest, the weather is different over there, and those cattle can continue to gain weight and grow. And that's the whole point, is to make food, right? To grow them up. It's very cold where we live, and I'm sure we'll cover that at some point. Those cattle really don't gain a lot of weight in the wintertime. They're staying warm to stay alive. Yeah. So they move them to the Midwest where different feed grows, and it's less expensive to take the animals to the feed than haul the feed to the animals. So we could truck all that feed from Nebraska and Minnesota and Iowa into Montana and finish them here, but it would take a lot longer. It would take a lot more natural resources. Yeah. So we can actually use fewer natural resources by hauling them to the Midwest, finishing them there, and then have them processed. But that's out of our hands at that point. We sell those calves and we start over with our mother cows again.
That's interesting. So, all right. And I know you're just coming into calving season right now. So let's talk about that. You said that they're bred in June and then they're born in March, roughly.
Yeah.
That's like that's like 9 months, right? Is that
it is? It is. It's very close to human gestation. So we usually turn out the first week of June, around the 7th, 10th, somewhere in there. And then we plan on starting to calve March 15th. Now, depending on the weather, depending on feed, depending on how quickly that calf grows inside the mother, they may come a little bit early. So when we have a long period of a sustained cold, deep cold in the third trimester, that cow is shunting blood to her core to stay alive. Well, that boosts fetal growth. And so we can have larger calves come in March if January and February is miserable cold. So we have to kind of watch that. We had some pretty significant cold in December, but it was only a few days. So we're expecting our calves start showing up somewhere between the 10th and 15th.
Yeah.
And then they'll calve for about 2 months.
That's super interesting that the colder weather actually results in a bigger baby cow, right?
It can, absolutely can, which then can cause problems because a cow can only pass a certain size calf. And so we may need to help her out with that.
Yes. So I have looked, I'm not a big Instagram person, but I've obviously looked at your Instagram because that's where you're very active.
Right.
At least you seem to be more active there than Facebook.
Right.
But I've seen you post. So maybe we'll show this and maybe we'll talk about it a little bit later, but you've posted some births, some cows coming right out of the chute. And then I've seen you also post that you needed to help. But it was just like a picture of a baby, like a freshly born calf.
Right.
And you just said, like, I need to help. Like, what does that entail? How do you help that situation?
So during calving season, we're checking on the cows every 2 to 3 hours and making sure that as they're coming into labor, they're progressing. And if that cow isn't moving forward in the process, we're not seeing feet stick out, we're not seeing legs come out, we don't see a head start coming out, there should be progress every 10, 15, 20 minutes. And if we're not seeing that, maybe there's a problem. It's the calf's role to get up in birth position. So they come out front feet first, followed by the head, and then obviously through the torso and the hips. If we look out there and the feet are pointed wrong, that calf may be coming backwards. The problem with that is that the umbilical cord tears as the calf is coming out, which is normal. That's normally what happens. But the calf's head is still inside amniotic fluid. And when that cord tears, that calf is stimulated to take a breath and they can drown. So if we see a calf coming backwards, we better be there to help and get that thing coming out. Now, a cow can pass a calf backwards, but we really try to put a lot of energy and pay attention to those and make sure we don't lose a calf because of that.
Yeah.
So what we'll do, we'll bring that cow into the barn. If the calf is backwards, we'll bring him in. If the calf, maybe one leg is presenting and one is behind, she's not going to get through the birth canal. So we'll go in there, bring the cow into the barn, put her in a stanchion where there's it's called a head catch. They put their head through it. We close it down. They can still breathe. They just can't pull backwards out of it. It holds it in place.
Yeah.
We can approach them from behind, and our cows know us. They're comfortable with us. I'm sure they don't like it, but we'll glove up and we'll go inside and we'll feel for that calf. And if we need to pull an arm up, let's say they have a front leg behind, we'll reach up in there, get a position to get that into place. But you want to make sure the cervix is dilated, that there's plenty of room. It's just like OB, where you're working with a human having a baby, and all the relaxin hormones come in. The body needs to loosen up, the ligaments loosen up, the birth canal opens, the cervix dilates. And I'm on the fire department as well, so we once in a while, have to deliver a baby. I haven't yet. I'm sure it'll happen at some point, but
if that were to happen, that person would be in good hands, because you basically know what you're doing here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll make it happen, and we don't bring them into the barn. We can do it wherever they're at. Put her in the head catch, but we want to make sure that calf is coming correctly and it's not too large. If a calf is in the birth canal for too long and the cow isn't passing it, it can become very stressful on that calf. And it's not good for them. So we're paying attention. We really pay attention to our first year mothers, our heifers. They're not full grown yet, but they have a calf. We select bulls for those heifers that are predisposed to throw a little bit smaller calf. And so it's easier for her to pass. We'd rather have a live calf that's a little bit smaller than a dead calf that's full size. Mm-hmm. So they get a specific bull that only ever sees the heifers, so that it's easier for her to calve. And then when she's full grown, she gets into the herd and sees the rest of the herd bulls. But we go in there manually. We'll palpate. We'll feel for that calf. We'll get the legs in place. We have obstetric chains, stainless steel chains. We'll go in there and put on their feet if we need to. And then we have handles. We can either pull the calf manually just by ourselves, or if it's particularly stuck, we'll go in there with some lube, get that calf lubed up well, and the birth canal looped well. And we actually use it's called a come along. It's a cable winch, a manual cable winch that's attached to the wall. And we'll put pressure on that calf to start pulling it through, and make sure we're not hurting the mother, make sure we're not hurting the calf. But sometimes you have to put a little pressure on that to get that calf to come. Yeah. Sometimes with those heifers, they get tired, they get wore out, and they quit, and they have plenty of room. A lot of times we can go and just pull that by hand, but we don't have to pull as many calves as we used to. We're very specific about the bulls we buy, and we're specific about the cows that we keep as replacements to make sure they have the right shape pelvis. They've got plenty of room to birth a calf. So we really try to limit having problems with calving.
As you were just describing that, I mean, I almost like, I have 3 kids. I almost like was back into the delivery room, when right. Hearing a doctor talk about cervix being dilated and like that process, you're basically a cow baby doctor or OBGYN kind of.
You do a lot. Yeah, you absolutely do a lot, because we have a veterinarian that we use for complicated cases. If we have a calf that we just absolutely cannot get out and we need to do a cesarean section, then either he'll drive out to the ranch or we'll trailer that cow into Missoula, it's our closest town, and take it to the vet clinic and have it done there. So we'll do what we can, but we'll also know our limits and won't jump into that if we don't need to.
Yeah. And these calves, when they're born, how big are they? They look pretty big to me. Like, what's their weight?
Roughly 80 to 90 pounds, somewhere in there. So we've got a guest coming in here now, but anyway, roughly 80 to 90 pounds.
That's amazing. That is so big. So how big is the mother then?
Oh, roughly 1,200 or so.
1,200 pounds.
Yep.
Oh my God.
Yep. 11 to 1,200
so that's amazing. It's hard, like watching your videos. Obviously I could tell the cow's big, but it was hard for me to, get a sense of how much that weighed. I was going to guess maybe like 50 pounds for the calf and 400 or 500 pounds,
So like the heifer calves, or the calves that come from our heifer cows, maybe 60 to 70 pounds, because those cows are maybe only 900 pounds that they weigh. So they're smaller. And so we'd like to have a smaller calf come out for sure.
And so come calving season in March, how many total new calves are you talking about birthing?
This year, I think we'll calve out about 170. We're expecting 170. Now, wow. I don't know that we'll have 170. I know that we've lost at least one already. We found a calf that was aborted out in the field. Boy, 2 months ago. And that can happen for any number of reasons. The cows can fight, and the calf gets bumped and dies, and the cow expels it. It could be illness. It could be a genetic condition with the calf, whatever it is. So that cow then will move out of the herd. She won't be a breeding cow anymore.
Is that right?
Because we don't know why. And we can't afford to keep her for another year to rebreed if she's not producing a calf. And during calving season, you'll lose some. They'll get sick, or maybe another cow steps on it, whatever it is. Heaven forbid a predator take it. We don't have a lot of predator pressure on our ranch during calving, but that's very common around here. So in that case, we may have a cow with twins, and we can rob one of those twin calves and graft it onto that cow, so she'll at least raise a calf for us for that year.
Wow. Yeah. And in terms of predators, is it wolves mostly? What's
we have coyotes, we have wolves, we have mountain lions, we have black bears, we have grizzly bears.
Wow, grizzlies.
Yeah, Jeez. Absolutely. So, and they've come across the ranch. They've been tracked through here, but we work hard to reduce conflicts with a number of means. We can put flagging up called flaggery. It's red flagging that we can put around the calving yard, and that apparently has worked really well at deterring wolves. We have neighbors about 25 miles up the road in Ovanda who use that very successfully.
And what is that? Just a red? It's just red flag?
It looks like a football flag. It's exactly what it is. It's red. It hangs from a wire. They're spread out maybe every 20 feet. They're about 1.5 feet long. And it makes motion.
The wind's just blowing it?
Yeah. Wind just kind of ruffles it, and for some reason the wolves don't like that. Mountain lions don't mind it; they'll walk right through it. I just saw a video last week of a cat walking right through the flaggery. So, but we're out there every 2 to 3 hours, depending on the temperature. When it's super cold, about every 2 hours. When it's the rest of the time, if we're dipping below freezing, we'll go out every 3 hours or so. So keeping some human presence around helps keep predators away. The other thing we'll do at night, we bring the cows in closer to the barns and the buildings, just for the evening, so that they're easier to find too. Having that human presence around keeps some of the predators at bay. So now when we're calving, we don't have as much bear conflict. They're not out yet. They're
hibernating.
Yeah. They're starting to come out in March, but there's usually other food out there for them. The bear conflicts tend to happen in the summertime when cattle are out on the range and they're not being observed. We're not out there. You can get some more of the conflicts with bears, but springtime, definitely mountain lions can come in. Coyotes haven't been a large problem for us in a number of years. They were a few years back when there was a crash in the deer and rabbit population. They had less food, and there had been a spike in the coyote population, so they were looking for things. The coyotes are out there while we're calving, but they're generally out there cleaning up the afterbirth. The expelled predators. Oh, they love that. Yeah, absolutely. So they're coming in. It's super majestic watching coyotes and eagles fight over afterbirth.
Wait, did you say eagles? Coyotes?
Yeah, bald eagles and golden eagles come in during calving.
Wow.
Absolutely. So, but they're generally leaving the calves alone. Now, if there's a cow that doesn't get up right away, or there's a calf that doesn't get up right away, you can start to have issues because they'll think it's a carcass and they're there to clean up. That's their role. So we just try to keep presence around, and it helps keep the conflict away.
And what is it about the afterbirth that these animals are so are going for it so much? Does it taste amazing? I would have thought afterbirth would be disgusting.
It's food.
It's just easy food. Is that what it is? It's food. Like an easy. Yeah.
It's food, right? It's got protein. It's all protein, is what it is. So lots of calories. It's a big chunk of vitamins and minerals, right? There's a lot of iron in there in the different parts of it. So absolutely. You'll see eagles flying away carrying it.
Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We get baldies and the goldens coming in during calving.
I had no idea about that.
Yeah.
As far as the grizzly bears go, I mean, a grizzly bear is a huge animal. Is that something would they take a full-size cow? Do you have to worry about that?
Pretty rare. Very rare to have a bear take a full-size animal. If they did, there was probably already something wrong with that animal. Maybe it broke a leg. We had a bull disappear a few years back. was out on summer range in the timber ground, and we had a range rider who spends time out all summer riding amongst our cows horseback, and she keeps an eye on things and lets us know kind of what critters she's seeing. And she had found a carcass with a bear on it, and she got off. It was interesting. She pushed the bear off the carcass, and this was a black bear, but she pushed a bear off the carcass with her horse, and then stood there with the bear chomping its jaws at her, taking a picture of the carcass and holding onto the horse. So,
and she needs to document that. Is that what's
well? She wanted to let us know what animal was missing. She was looking for an ear tag, and we thought it was a calf because of the size, but as it turns out, it was the bull. That bear had spent probably a couple weeks eating on it and had twisted the hide up down to the size of maybe a 300-pound calf. So that's generally when you're going to find bear predation. Now, they can come after calves. Absolutely. We used to run our cows in the summertime up in Ovando, closer to the Bob Marshall Wilderness. And the grizzlies were pretty thick there, and they would take those calves. Those calves were up to 500 pounds by that time, come August and September. So they absolutely would take a calf for sure.
So in 6 months, they're at like they've gained like 400 pounds almost.
Yeah, we generally sell our calves in November about 625, 650 pounds.
Wow.
So that 80-pound calf in March, it'll be 650 by November.
That's amazing. And so that sounds like a bit of a scary encounter, running across this black bear, and the horse isn't afraid. Like the horse actually was tangling with the bear to get him off.
Our range rider hunts bears and uses her horse quite often, so the bear is used to the smell and used to the sound, and is just very confident in the rider. They have a strong bond, and so that horse stood its ground, and the bear didn't approach; it stayed back.
Wow.
So that's one of the predator conflict tools that we use, is having a range rider in the summertime go out a couple times a week, just keeping human presence around the cows that we have up on our timberland. So that's helped quite a lot. Electric fencing helps. We have electric fence up around the calving yards. That keeps a lot of predators out. But yeah, summertime, any number of things can happen.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Is that your dog that's there? What kind of dog do you have?
My dad just showed up with his dog, and then my dog is here. Yes.
Oh, yeah. What kind of dogs? And are they out there? They get out running around on the range?
They're more pets. We don't really have working cow dogs. I've got a German Shepherd, and Dad has a mini Aussie.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah.
But do they get out? Like, do you let them just run out and have some fun, or are they just totally like?
They tend to stay close. They tend to stay close to us.
Yeah.
They'll get out. They have room to roam for sure. But my dog especially has some anxiety issues. So she sticks pretty tight to me. She sticks close to the truck. When I'm out feeding, she stays behind. She jumps up in the pickup, waits till I come home, till I come back.
Yeah. March, the calves are born.
Yep.
That takes us back to June when the breeding starts. You mentioned that you have some bulls. You own like a stable of bulls.
Yes.
That's what I wanted to ask you about. How does that all work? How do you get, is it sort of like is it a mating season? Is that their mating season? Or like, how do you make sure that the bulls impregnate the cows so that you can have some babies 9 months later?
So that breeding for us really starts in February. We bring the veterinarian out who does an exam on the bulls to make sure that they're fertile, that their numbers are up as far as motility and volume, that they can do the job. When we get very cold weather for extended periods of time, that can be hard on the bulls with an exposed scrotum. They can freeze, and then your bull is no good. So we have breeding exams in February, make sure that the bulls are good, because the bull sales are happening right now in March, April, because folks want to turn them out come June and July for breeding. So do our breeding soundness exams, and then we'll turn them out in June. Those cows cycle roughly every 28 days, very similar to a human.
Wow.
And so they're coming into heat cycles. And so we'll turn them out in June, and those bulls go out there, and we use a certain number of bulls per number of cows. It's not one bull per cow. It's maybe one bull per every 30 cows or so they can do. So We have our herd broken up in the summertime, depending on where we're grazing them and depending on where they live for the summer. And so we'll take a look at the number of cows and turn out enough bulls into those cows that spend the next couple of months with them. Ideally, we would go gather those bulls after 2 months so that our calving window is at 2 months. Sometimes we leave the bulls in a little bit longer, especially up in our timber ground. They get it's hard to corral them and bring them just one animal home, so they tend to stay a little bit longer. But we turn them out in June and July. They're doing their thing. They're walking around smelling cows, smelling for the hormones, and they know when that cow's in heat. If the cow stands for them, they'll do their job. And so
it's really like you're just introducing them, right? You're saying here, and then you just leave. So it's not that of a control. It's not that. Tightly controlled operation.
We control what bulls we buy.
Right.
When we go to a bull sale, you don't just go look, oh, that's a nice looking bull, I'll buy him. No, there's all kinds of genetic data and statistics on what this bull should do based on his sire and his dam and their progeny. They keep data on all those calves. So you can look back and say, this bull should add this kind of weight to our herd. It should be maybe a calving ease bull. That's a name for a bull that produces maybe a little bit smaller calf that's easier to pass for those younger cows.
What did you call that? Can you say that again?
Calving ease. So there's all kinds of data. They call it EPDs, expected progeny differentials, where it's amazing the stats. It's about like reading stats in baseball. There's just all kinds of stats on average daily gain, pounds added before weaning weight, birth weights, milking. So if we keep cows back as breeding animals, breeding stock, they need to be able to produce enough milk to raise a calf. And so there's data on milk rates, and so you can kind of construct what you want your herd to look like based on what your customer wants to buy.
Yeah.
So we'll pick bulls that work well for us and work well in our landscape. They've got to be able to climb some mountains and deal with some rough terrain in the summertime and give us the calves that we want. So they spend the summer with the cows, and then come fall when we gather and bring them all in, we'll pull the bulls off, and they get to spend the rest of the year just hanging out in the bullpen, eating hay and drinking water and living the life.
They literally stay in a bullpen. Is that right?
They stay in a bullpen. Yep, absolutely.
And so is it, does it ever happen that the cows don't want to do what they got to do?
If the cow is not in heat, they absolutely won't stand for a bull.
Yeah.
But the bull also won't approach her. She doesn't smell right. She's not in heat, and they go find a different cow. We did have an accident a few years back where we had 2 bulls in with a pen of cows. And that fall, when we preg checked, we had a whole bunch of open cows. And we were talking with a vet, and we knew that the older bull had broken his penis.
Oh my God.
During the breeding season. But we had another bull in there, so we thought, we're fine. There's a second bull. He'll get the job done. Well, as it turns out, that older, bigger bull that injured himself then defended the rest of the cows from that younger bull, and they didn't get bred. So he didn't just go off and hang out in the shade. He still felt like he had to defend those cows. So that's something you have to watch in the summertime is, did that bull hurt himself? Do we need to get a different bull in there? Do we need to get him out of there?
Yeah.
It's rare that it happens, but it definitely happens.
And how exactly does he break his penis? How does that work? Do you have any idea how that
missed the hole?
Oh, really?
It just jammed into the side
it's
of the
that
cow.
Delicate?
Yeah. Well, when you have a 2,000-pound animal.
Yeah.
I guess so.
I wasn't thinking.
They have a lot of power. And it's not like this nice long courtship. That bull jumps up on top of there, and it's there's a lot of energy. And if they don't find the right spot, it can break. Yeah. Wow. Unfortunately.
That's interesting. So the other thing you mentioned is you've got all this data. How's this data coming to you? Do you have they have this all up in an app at some point? Is it like super easy to?
So, I talked about us being a commercial cow-calf producer. There are seed stock producers. Those are the folks who are raising the registered animals and selling the bulls. They're selling genetics. So they keep track of all of that data and all of those bulls, and they produce a sale catalog coming up before the sale, usually a month out, that has a picture of all the animals, has a picture of the different sires, and then has all of that data. And so if we know that we like a certain lineage of, let's say, Red Angus, our cows are generally Red Angus with some Simmental cross. We know that we like, I'm not even, there was a Commander was one of the sire lineages that we liked. You could go in through that catalog and you can see who bred who, and you can go back to some of those other older lines and know, like, we liked the way that bull performed for us. We'll get one of those other sons again.
Yeah.
So you go back through there and sit down at the sale and actually go look at the bull, make sure its temperament is good. We're pretty hands-on. We get in small pens with the bulls and with the cows, and they have to not be aggressive. We don't want a buddy hanging on us either. We want, someone who respects us, but isn't going to run us into the fence and hurt anybody. Right. So, we joke that we have old fences and old dogs and old men working on the ranch. We want animals that we can handle.
Yeah.
And not hurt anybody. So we'll get in the pen with the young bulls. They're year old at that point. Wow. They're yearling bulls, and they're ready to start breeding that year.
And how old can a bull, the bull that injured himself, how old was he? And is that is he done after that?
He was 6. He's done. That's not it's not fatal and that it's broken, but it's fatal in that he can't do his job anymore.
Yeah.
And so his job description changes and he goes into the food chain. So he becomes burger. And really is what it is.
And he was 6 years old. And is that roughly the age that they sort of start retiring, or?
That's about the max for our bulls, 6 to 7 years. At that point, they're pretty big. They're hard on their feet. That's a lot of weight on their feet. Their feet start breaking down. They start to get kind of ornery. They'll lose some of their virility. They're not as good at breeders anymore. And they can get too big for the cows, and they can start hurting cows. So we've got to kind of watch and make sure the bulls aren't getting too large. But usually by that point, their feet are starting to go bad. It's time to move them down the road.
Yeah. And just to go back to the catalog. So that's an actual catalog, a paper, thing that goes in the mail?
Absolutely.
But they don't have this digitized yet. I'm surprised there's not a.
You can
log on to an app and see the same thing. Yeah.
I don't think anybody has an app because, there may be apps for some of the larger producers, but we're talking family farms that may be only selling 100 head. Yeah. And so the cost of developing an app doesn't really make sense. And for the most part, the buyers want a paper catalog in front of them as they're looking at the bulls and as they're coming in the ring, so that they can read the stats, read the data live in front of them. And we're in Montana. We don't have service everywhere. So you're sitting there and your phone has no service. The app does you no good.
Yeah.
So you're going to download it anyway. You're going to download a PDF. So it's just easier to have a piece of paper for that scenario. They do email them out. We'll have it electronically ahead of time, and we'll do some scouting beforehand. We'll say, well, here's kind of a couple of numbers that we like. We like number 5 and number 7 and maybe number 12 and 25, whatever it is. So we'll then go find those individual bulls. But I don't know if I have any bull sale catalogs in here with me, but I'll send you a link to one sometime.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah. And I'm sorry. That was very coastal presumptuous of me. Internet services everywhere here. I just assume that it's like that all over the place.
Our valley has one cell tower. It's T-Mobile.
Yeah.
So I have Verizon service. Which means I don't have service unless I'm in Wi-Fi. Like right now, I'm on Wi-Fi at the ranch. Some places, some folks put in a cell booster. And so when I go into Potomac and I work at the school, I have Verizon service there because we have a cell booster. But there are a lot of places in Montana you don't have cell service.
Interesting. And what about Starlink? Have you thought about Starlink at all? The SpaceX product?
So my cousin has Starlink. He's moving more data. He works from home. And so the way the ranch works, we all work off the ranch as well as on the ranch. So just to provide that extra income, we need to make a go of it. So he's a military contractor. So he needs a lot of volume. He needs to be able to move a lot of data. And so Starlink works for him. We have basically it's DSL, but it works for what we do. My wife works from home remotely for a health insurance technology company out of Boston, and she's able to do everything over the phone lines with the internet set up that way. So we're scheduled to have fiber coming in the next year or two. So that'll come out to the homes, but that's fine. You deal with it.
Yeah, I had no idea, Justin, because I was just looking at your Instagram. You're so active on there, and you've got so many cool photos and everything and videos. Right. I just assumed like you've got high speed internet all the time. It's like
not all the time.
Yeah,
nope. Yeah. I post when I get back home, or get back in service somewhere. Yeah. But you don't have to go very far. Honestly, I can go 10 miles to the other side of the divide right over here, and I've got great service. So. Yeah. It's fine. It works out just fine. I'm on the fire department as well, and we all get paged out through the old school pagers. People laugh that we still carry a pager. Yeah.
So if you get an emergency, that's how they're getting a hold of
it. We still get paged out over radio. Yeah. So that's just the way it works here.
Yeah. And how is it on the fire department out there? Do you get? I saw on your Instagram too. You have. I think there was. It looked like a barn was on fire or something in one of the situations that you posted.
We've had we cover a little bit of everything. So we have a highway 200 comes through the valley. So honestly, we're probably dealing with more car crashes and medical calls than fires. Summertime we get wildland fires, either lightning strike or piece of farm equipment sparks and catches a field on fire.
Yeah.
But yeah, we do get some building fires, home fires once in a while. We do. So it's an entirely volunteer fire department. We wear pagers, and those who can show up, show up. There's no call schedule. You're kind of always on call. Yeah. And so if you go, you try to go. But that also means you might be up in the woods checking cows.
Yeah.
And it takes you half an hour to get to the station. And then you get to leave. You get to go. So that's part of living in rural Montana is you're not going to have a 2-minute response from the fire department.
Well, that's great that you do that. I mean, just given how busy you are looking after all the cows all day, that's got to be tough. I would imagine it sometimes, to run from one thing to the other. Yeah,
it is. And you have to make some decisions. If I'm working with a cow in the middle of pulling a calf, I'm probably not going to leave and go to a car. But what we'll do though, is we'll split up and somebody will go and the rest will stay behind. We had a pretty nasty car crash this spring while we were vaccinating cows and going through that whole process. We couldn't really stop, but we split the crew in half. Half the folks left and went to the call. The other half stayed and continued to work. So you have to make some of those decisions that somebody needs to stay.
Yeah. Can we take a look at one of the birthing videos, by the way? I saved a link to one of them.
Yeah.
Are you okay showing it? Are you okay
go
showing
ahead.
it? I'm going to try a screen share so you can talk about it. I'll share the screen and then you just talk us through what we're looking at here.
Oh, there we go. Yep.
So what happened? Maybe I think it'll. Oh, here. All right.
Yeah, it's coming up. So what I'm doing right there is I'm wanting to make sure that the sack is not over the nose of the calf, that the calf can get air. So sometimes that sack can be kind of tough. There she gets up. She's going to come around, take a sniff of it. She's going to identify it and know that that's her calf now. She is bonding with that calf. So there you can see the calf coming out.
Yeah.
The hips are just popping out right there. So I didn't need to be there for that one. I could see its nose, but I wanted to make sure that it was breathing was all right. Sometimes when that sack gets too tough, that calf can suffocate. If you notice that cow's laying there, she's catching her breath. But her job is to get up and start licking on that calf and pull that sack off if it hasn't torn and come off.
Yeah.
But if she's coming up, she's getting a sniff of it, identifying that that's her calf. She'll start slicking on it, cleaning it off, warming it up. And that calf's job now is to get up and get its first meal. They come out hungry. So
is that's right?
Something. Yeah, absolutely. So that's something we have to pay attention to. Not only does that calf need to be a live birth, but that calf needs to get up and get a meal. That's when it gets its all the antibodies from the mother and that colostrum. That first batch of milk coming through is super high calorie. It's super thick.
Okay, that's
all the
right. That's the same thing as a baby. That's the same thing as a baby. Yeah,
absolutely. Human. Yeah. And it is very, very important for the health of that calf to get that first meal. And if we're having trouble getting that calf to latch on and start nursing, we'll bring that cow in and we'll milk her and we'll tube that calf We have a gastric tube we'll put right in their stomach and give them a pint or a pint and a half, and then let them sit with their mother overnight. By morning, that calf is up and nursing, and we kick them back out. We generally don't have to bring them into the barn unless there's a problem. We try not to. And that's for a number of reasons. Like I said, we're picking our bulls a little bit better. We're having less trouble calving. We've moved our calving a month later. When I was a kid, we grew up calving in February. Miserable weather.
Yeah.
It was cold. Every single calf had to come in. They got chilled if they didn't eat right away. They would get frostbite. They would freeze their ears off, freeze their tails. And while that's not fatal to the calf, it can cause foot problems later in life when they're in Nebraska getting fed and try to get finished. They're having foot problems in the feedlot. And so you don't want them getting frozen. So it was a lot of work for us. And then the calves being in the barn were exposed to, they were laying in dirty straw. Even though as often as we cleaned it, those calves being that close to their mother would have infections in their umbilical cord, and they would get naval infections. And then you start having problems in their joints, and they were getting sick, and we're dealing with those infections. And so by calving later in the year, we can keep them outside. They're healthier, they're stronger, they're doing better. And it's less stress on us working on the ranch as well. Yeah. So that calf, it was nice and sunny and warm. He got right up and started nursing it.
Yeah. So they nursed, and then when do they get to start eating, solid food?
They will start nibbling on hay almost within a week or 10 days.
Really?
But they're nursing all the way until November. You'll have those 650-pound calves absolutely pushing those cows around. And those cows are sick of the calves at that point. We wean them at the time when the cow would normally be weaning, because she's trying to grow a new calf. She needs to be putting nutrients into that fetus and not into this big bulky steer banging on her all the time. So they're nursing all the way until then, but they're also eating all the grass and all the hay. But you'll see the calves are nibbling. They think it's fun. They're chewing on a stick, chewing on a little piece of alfalfa or grass, whatever. So it's fun, but it's right away. They'll start chewing on it.
That's amazing. And so you said something there. Let's talk about, you talked about when you were a kid, things were done differently. You're fourth generation, if I have that correct.
I'm third on
third
the ranch.
Generation ranch.
Third on the ranch. Yep.
So how is that? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say the fourth generation is here. My cousin's kids are living on the ranch. So we do have 4 generations, but I'm third.
You're the third. And are you sort of training them to be the fourth then?
I think there's no expectation that they'll be the fourth generation working the ranch. I honestly didn't think I was coming back. I got my degree in sports medicine and moved away. I lived in Oregon for 12 years and then started feeling the desire to come back and be a part of the legacy on the ranch and be part of this. So it was an adult decision for me. I had never planned on coming back. So if those kids want to come back, great. My wife and I do not have kids, but my cousins do, and they're our partners on the ranch. So this will eventually be theirs.
And so what did bring you back? What was it that made you want to come back to the ranch?
It was a number of things. We visited here quite often. I was coming over maybe 6 times a year, visiting and just spending a weekend, helping my folks. My brothers live out of state as well. I have one in Texas and one in California. I don't see them moving back. And as my folks age, I want to be there to help them out and take care of them. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to come back. I liked the lifestyle. I wanted to be out on the open ground and spend my time outside. And I didn't enjoy corporate America anymore. I was in a suit and tie every day and just really was not feeling that. That wasn't, Jennifer and I were successful and doing well. I had just built a nice home and we're planning on being there a long time. But we had a conversation, one road trip out here with some friends who just point blank asked why we didn't live in Montana. And we didn't have a very good reason. We had become very close with a ranching family back in Oregon and just really remembered what it was like to work with family and be around family and want to be part of that as we spent time with their family. And so we started having the discussion. Succession planning is a very difficult conversation for ranchers to have because they're so invested in the land and in the business, in the cattle. It's hard to let go. And I didn't ask my folks to let go. Obviously my dad's still here. He just walked in, he comes in and checks in with us every day and comes around and helps pay and helps his cabin and everything. He hasn't gone anywhere. It's just he doesn't have to write the checks and pay the bills anymore. So we want to come back and be a part of that and continue that legacy. I didn't want to lose the land. They didn't know what they were going to do with the place. They were getting to the point where they didn't want to have to run it anymore. And if we ever lost that land, we would never get it back. And Grandpa worked pretty hard to get this piece of ground, and Dad and his brother worked hard to keep it. Now that's my responsibility, is to keep it in the family. So we wanted to be a part of that. That family legacy was big for us, really for us.
And when you were in Oregon, where were you?
We were in Central Oregon. We started in Bend, and then we moved just a little bit east in Powell Butte in Crook County. And I had an office in Bend, but spent a lot of time in Prineville. We had a great time there. Jennifer worked in Bend as well, and her folks still live in Bend. That's what got us there. Jennifer grew up in Oregon.
Yeah. Now, does she have any ranching in her background as well, or?
No. Her family, well, I guess on her mother's side, they had cattle ranches down in Salmon, Idaho, but Jennifer didn't know them and really hadn't been around it. She was born in Montana, but was raised in Oregon. So they had connections here. She had family here. We actually knew her uncle. He worked for the county road department. But I didn't know Jennifer until college. She had come back to do a grad program, and met her at the University of Montana in Missoula. So that was a transition for her to move out to country life. But one of our first dates was her coming to the ranch with me in February in college, stay in the bunkhouse, and go out and check cows in the middle of the night for calves. I've got a picture of her at 2 a.m. out there doing a calf check. And I'm like, all right, well, she's pretty good if she can do that on a date.
Yeah.
Cows.
How did she like that experience?
I think she loved it. She thought it was great. She did not make it out for the later check. She slept in on that one, but that's okay. It was fine. So
you're getting up twice in the middle of the night, basically, to go check.
We're going out every 3 hours. So 9, 12, 3, and 6. And then throughout the day, whatever it is.
You can't get a nice chunk of sleep.
No, but so the way we work that is my cousin's husband and I are the managers on the ranch. We're the two that are responsible for getting it done. My cousin, her husband, and my wife and I are the owners of the place now. So Jeff and I run the ranch, and we take turns every other night. So at least every other night, we're getting a decent night's sleep. Yeah. So on the off nights, I come down here, I put up a bunk. I'm in the bunkhouse right now. That's where I am. Kind of a studio apartment we have in the garage on the ranch. But I can stay here. I can sleep. I can get up and not wake her up by getting up every 2 hours or 3 hours.
She liked it enough that first time, and now she's sort of living it, but it doesn't sound like
she's living it. So
she's not out there. Yeah.
Go ahead.
She's not out there like giving, birthing the calves and doing everything, right?
No. She'll come help if we're sorting or moving cows, moving different pastures. She'll come and help. But she works full time, like I said, remotely from the home office for a health insurance tech company. So she's pretty tied up with that.
Yeah.
But she'll help out.
And comparing, so you had some time in corporate America. It looks like you were working for a big life insurance company. Is that
exactly? Yep. Yeah,
and,
exactly.
And so this is just a much more agreeable lifestyle for you than the corporate world was.
Yeah, I enjoyed working with clients and helping them make plans and enact those plans and do good things for them. But I enjoy being outdoors and working outdoors, and the variety of what I do was super attractive, and I missed that. So you'll show up at the ranch and have a plan for the day, and nope, cows broke the fence, so now you're fencing. Nope, they broke the water line, now you're a plumber today. Nope, switch doesn't work in the barn, you're an electrician today. So it's varied. You get to do a lot of different things. Like I said, you get to be outside. You get to be outside in some pretty miserable weather at times, but it's pretty amazing to be out and watching these calves grow, and these cows have healthy calves, and know that you're providing a real need to people. We need to eat, and so we're able to convert these grasses that are not palatable into something that is palatable for humans. So this valley does not grow vegetables very well without a lot of inputs. You have to have huge greenhouses and a lot of energy going in. Boy, these cows can convert these grasses into steak pretty quickly. Yeah. So we're able to provide a food source that's something we need, and I enjoy that.
Yeah. Let's talk about the weather for a second.
Yeah.
Because actually that's how I kind of got to know you a little bit is yes. We were doing a story for AccuWeather about you guys were having some almost record cold early in the season in October 2020. And you were posting pictures of, minus 38, I think it was degrees for the low temperatures. And then you also posted pictures of the cattle. What looked to me like they were all huddled together and you could see their breath, and they looked like they were freezing, but you actually told me that they weren't really that freezing. So you want to explain how that is, how they're able to deal with that extreme weather?
Yeah, it goes back to buying good bulls and keeping good cows. Our cattle come out of Montana. We buy Montana genetics. Those Montana cattle are bred to withstand cold. They're bred to withstand a certain amount of heat. We don't get very hot here, but they can handle the cold. And with enough feed and enough care and time getting into cold, they build up a huge undercoat of hair. And with enough feed, they produce enough heat to stay warm. They're just fine. As long as we keep enough feed and water in front of them, they're fine. They do really well. We do have some concerns with the bulls. Like I said, they can freeze their scrotum and have breeding problems down the road. Once in a while, a cow might freeze an ear, but that's pretty rare. Generally, that happens when they're calves. Their ears are a little thinner. They might be wet from being born, and they'll freeze the tips off. But the adult cows do fine. You'll see pictures of snow piled up on top of the cows. That's not because they're cold. It's because they're well insulated. So you look at homes in the wintertime, the poorly insulated homes don't have snow on the roof because all the heat's escaping.
Yeah.
The snow on the roof of the home means it's well insulated. Same thing with the cows. They have a good fat layer. They have plenty of hair, and they're warm. They're not happy. No one's happy when it's that cold. Yeah. We got hit with that extreme cold in October. Was definitely early for us. It's not unusual to get below zero, but I think we hit 29 below, and they had haired up by that point. The hair starts coming on as we freeze at night in end of August and September. The cows start getting that thicker coat so that then they shed come spring and get more smooth. But they handled it just fine. We don't get a lot of wind in the valley. It's very rare that we have wind when it's that cold. Generally, it's sunny and warm. So you'll see the cows, they'll clump up to conserve some body heat, but then also face the sun, and they'll get some of that solar radiation and stay warm that way. If we had more wind, we'd really have to be careful with getting some wind breaks out there to get them out of the wind and keep them from getting quite so cold. This winter, we've had some record temperatures. I think in that October, we set the record for coldest in October in the lower 48. We have a very cold little valley, and that temperature sensor that I send pictures out is calibrated. It's a National Weather Service piece of equipment. We have a National Weather Service co-op station here. So it's calibrated, it's accurate. It's not just a dial thermometer from Ace Hardware, right?
Right. Those are official numbers that you're recording.
Those are official numbers. Yeah. Yep. So in December, 2 months ago, we had some pretty serious cold. We didn't quite get record cold. We were off the record by 1 degree, but we hit 49 below November 23rd. That was miserable. That was awful cold.
Yeah. And how do you survive that cold? I mean, the cows, obviously they got their really thick fur and all that, but what about you? What do you do? And your
So we start planning ahead and making sure that we don't turn off the water in the house. We leave faucets running very slowly, so that you constantly have groundwater temperature water coming into your lines. You open cupboards, you keep heaters on. You try to keep things from freezing. We make sure the stock tanks stay open for the cows, make sure they have water. We have submersible electric heaters in each of the stock tanks to try to keep them warm. But when it gets that cold, the top layer of water just still is going to freeze. And so that means we need to go out and chip ice for the cows.
Oh my God.
That temperature is incredibly cold for the tractors. It's hard on tractors. So we know we have a period of extreme cold coming. We'll go ahead and feed for multiple days at a time so that we don't have to fire up the equipment. It's just too hard. You get metal fatigue and things start breaking. So where we have the cows in the wintertime, they can move between linked pastures that will feed them in the pasture that has the water tank in it, lock that gate, and we'll feed in the next pasture, close the gate, feed the next pasture, close that gate, feed the next. I think we had fed for 4 or 5 days in a row, so that all we had to do was go out and open the next gate. They could move into the hay ground and then back to water. Then the next day you feed, open the third pen, and they move through 3 pens and back to water every time. So you try to plan ahead and have that available for them.
Yeah.
And we try not to calve during the really cold weather. If we were calving them, I guarantee you we lost calves. They just not going to survive that. We had a really rough day back. I think it was 2 years ago. We had some awful cold in in March when we were calving. We had some below zero weather, and we had 2 cows in distress. They were both calving, but one was making progress. And so the cow who was not making progress, we were working with her in the barn, trying to get the calf out. The other cow outside, a young cow, was having progress, but gave up with the calf halfway out, and the calf froze solid halfway out of.
Wow.
We were busy working with another cow, and we lost that calf. It happened. It's terrible.
Yeah.
So we try not to calve, and we get some of those temperatures that'll come through in March and April. We'll get some of those really late winter storms, but it's pretty rare. But we go out more often then and try to check for issues. So that was one of those freak instances of something happening and you just could not get around it. It is what it is. So we had to make a choice, and we were going to lose one calf one way or another, unfortunately.
Yeah. And do you think it was partly the weather, the temperature had, an effect on the mother
for sure
giving up?
Yeah. It was a young cow, and they fatigue easily. The older cows know they just have to push through it and get it done and get that calf out. The younger cows will kind of give up and rest, and they'll walk around with the calf sticking halfway out of them for an hour and wondering what is going on. They just need to lay down and get the job done. So that was a scenario. The cow was fatigued, whether it was weather or, calving, birthing is a very energy expensive project for anyone. So she just got wore out and quit, and we lost the calf. So that doesn't happen very often, but it does.
And then with this minus 49 degrees that you had in December, how are you personally going out? Like, what are you doing to not get frostbite at that temperature? It seems like
pretty bundled up and then stay dry, which honestly, it's dry and sunny and gorgeous outside when it's that cold. It's beautiful. You got to be careful. You bundle up, you cover your face, and you're talking long johns, a pair of jeans, and then heavy Arctic insulated Carhartt bibs over the top of that. And you've probably got a couple of shirts and a flannel and a hoodie and maybe a jacket over all that.
You're well layered.
Very well layered. Yeah. And then wear big silk, we call them wild rags. It's a 48-inch by 48 square of silk that you tie around your neck, and it's nice and warm and can keep your face thawed out. You got a good hat on. I don't have much hair to keep me warm, so I've got to have a good hat.
Yeah.
But then, your cheeks and nose tip will freeze. You got to be careful. If you keep your eyes closed too long, then you have a face cover on, the water vapor from your exhalation go up and will ice your eyelashes, and you can freeze your eyes closed. That's
oh my God. Has that ever happened to you?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, absolutely.
And then what do? You must have to, can you just you
got to take your gloves off, which is awesome when it's 49 and you just thaw out the ice. Yeah. And if you're blinking, it's not going to happen. But, as a kid, you'd try to make it happen. Like, this is cool.
Yeah.
I can freeze my eyes closed. But boy, you need some sunglasses on too, because it's white snow out there. Yeah. The sun is bright. You'll get some sunburn for sure. And you get some cold burn going on. So, but for the most part, you're working and trying to keep everything running, and you're moving around enough. You're staying warm. Had some difficulty starting my truck that day. I did have it plugged in. I've got a block heater that preheats the coolant in the engine. Mm-hmm. So it's easier to start. All of our tractors have coolant heaters on them that pump hot antifreeze through the engine to get them to start. I had the same thing on my vehicle to get it started. And then when it was that cold, I had to leave the truck run all day. I didn't want it started again. It was just too hard on it. So my truck ran 8 hours straight. That's very rare that we get that cold. That's the coldest I've ever seen. I've gotten down to 30 and 38 below, but 49 was even worse.
That's ungodly.
Yeah, and our record was 50 below for the valley, so we're off
so almost degree. There. Yeah,
I was kind of upset, but kind of happy. I guess we didn't make a new record.
Yeah, I don't know how you deal with that personally. I would not be able to handle that kind of cold and going out as many times as you all do. I wouldn't. I would fall apart, I think. But how long have you been back at this? So how long when you said you had your stint in the corporate world? You went back for how long now at the ranch?
Moved back in 2012. So I've been home for 11 years.
11 years.
Now. And we bought out my folks, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago. We put the plan together to buy them out of their ownership in the land and the ranch and help them retire. And then had put some things in place for my cousins to start coming home. And they have now. Both of my cousins have moved back to the ranch. One is an owner in the ranch. The other one is not yet. And they may own, they may not. Who knows? They don't have to. So we've got a plan in place for now for keeping the thing going. But yeah, it's been 11 years that I've been home.
And when you came back at first, how was that transition for you? Did you get hit right in the face with this kind of like this brutal weather and this getting up all the multiple times in the middle of the night? Was that had to be a change of pace at least?
I moved back at the start of calving, and my first night back, I got the night checks, and we had a blizzard come in that night.
Oh God!
It was pitch black, absolutely sideways snow. I had a cow calving, a young cow calving, and then she jumped over the fence and abandoned her calf, and so I had to get that calf in. He was nearly frozen. Meanwhile, she went off and had a second calf on a different part of the ranch, a quarter mile away.
So she was carrying twins, essentially.
She was carrying twins and knew that she had to get this other calf out. So she abandoned her first calf and went and she was confused. Hormones are really moving around when they're calving. And so the cows can get incredibly confused when they're calving. And so she took off, was upset, ran away. I had to go wake up my uncle, wake up my dad, try to find her. Once we did find her, then we found she had another calf. We had to get them in. We spent all night. We ended up losing one of the calves, the one that she'd abandoned froze. That was my first night home. Lost. It was brutal. It had nowhere to go but up. It was an awful, awful night. So
were you at all rethinking your decision at that point?
Why am I doing this? Why are we doing this? And by that point, it was March. We had moved calving. It was first part of March. We've moved it a couple of weeks later since. But no, I didn't regret it. It was a tough night, but I knew there were going to be tough nights. I got it over with right away.
Yeah.
So the rest of calving season went well at that point. But it was a rough start, really rough start. And trying to get, reacquainted with everybody, find everything again. Missoula had changed. The area had changed a lot in the 12 years I was gone. And my wife was still back in Oregon working and trying to sell the house. So I was here on my own. It took 3 or 4 months before she moved out, but we got that handled. So fortunately, I had a place to land. I moved back to the ranch house and lived with grandma for a couple of months. So had a place to be anyway. It was on the ranch. Yeah. But it was, I didn't get eased into it at all.
It doesn't sound like it. And so, and you also grew up, so you had the familiarity, at least you understood.
Absolutely.
And did you do much work when you were growing up, when you were a kid?
We did everything on the ranch. We were active in school, so we missed a few things, but we were out. Dad would make us go out and help calve in the middle of the night or help pull a calf, give him a hand if he needed it. We weren't responsible for the nighttime checks, but we were out haying when we were kids and running equipment and cutting hay and breaking hay and baling hay and hauling hay. And that's kind of our big thing in July is putting up all the hay, and spend about a month collecting all that hay that we're going to need for the winter. So was super familiar with that. Growing up on the ranch, you learn a lot of different trades. I hadn't learned welding, growing up. And so I actually went and took an adult ed class my first 2 years home and learned how to weld, because you have to be pretty self-sufficient out here. You got to be able to fix things. We have a great machinist who will build parts and do some welding for us, but it gets really expensive doing every single little project. So we need to be able to maintain our equipment. So you get a lot of practice in mechanics and engine work and heavy equipment work and fixing things. And like I said earlier, the electrical work and plumbing, you pick up all of that. And in college, I had built homes for a couple of years with a contractor. So I had some knowledge on construction, which is super helpful, because we have to fix broken doors and fences and barn panels, whatever. So yeah, you have to be pretty handy and be self-sufficient.
And you were doing all that a little bit, I guess, not apart from the welding, but you were doing a little bit of that as a kid, picking it up right way. Did you have time for other stuff as a kid? Did you play sports? Did you, or was it sort of, you had a lot of work to do there?
We didn't have time for a lot. We were always doing something on the ranch. If you're before haying, we're out there irrigating, we're changing pipe, walking through the hayfield, carrying the aluminum pipes and relinking them and getting the water flowing. So in high school, well, even in grade school, we played basketball. High school, played some football, was in track and field, was a thrower. I'm not built as a runner. I pick up heavy things and move them. So that was kind of my role. My brothers and I all played football and did track in high school. So college, I didn't do athletics. My brother played football at Montana Tech. Out of high school, he played for a couple of years. I met my wife in the athletic training program. I worked in sports medicine. That's what I got my degree in. So was active in athletics, but on the medical side. I had hurt my knee playing high school football and had gone through the rehab program and just really liked that work and really enjoyed that in college. And that's what I did when I came out of school. I actually worked for an orthopedic and neurosurgical clinic in Oregon as an athletic trainer. They had us in the clinic in the mornings doing post-op care with patients, rehab. You'll see orthopedic patients with the big halos, the big external fixators. Like if they break a femur, they'll have all the big hardware you see sticking out of their leg, rods and screws and pins. My job was to remove all of that, disassemble all those pieces. So in the afternoons, then the clinic paid for athletic trainers to be in the high schools to provide injury care on the field for the athletes at the schools. And that served a number of purposes, the biggest one being taking liability off the coaches regarding return to play guidelines. So we had a very, very robust concussion management protocol back in 2001. We started a concussion management program. We're pretty early on with some of that concussion work. But then you're doing all the orthopedic care on the field, identifying injuries, doing small rehab, getting them prepped and ready for games, things like that. So was super involved in athletics growing up that way.
And were you dealing with a lot of football players then, it sounds like?
A little bit of everything. So anywhere you saw athletic injuries, from cross country to soccer to football, volleyball, basketball, track, even did some rodeo sports medicine. That was a lot of fun, very high energy injuries, and not a lot of opportunity to spend time doing rehab. It was fix me up so I can ride again, tape up my foot that's broken so I can get back on the horse. Pretty wild injuries. But
what was the worst injury you ever saw when you were doing that? And was it from a rodeo? It seems like that would be.
No,
we're so little protection.
It's kind of all over the board. One of the most interesting ones, I didn't get to see the injury. I saw the scars and saw the aftermath. Had a steer wrestler come in for an arm injury, and he had a great big scar just right in front of his shoulder by his chest, and started asking him about it. And he had, in steer wrestling, they come off the horse and lean onto the steer and grab the horns and tip it over. You hook a horn in the elbow and put a hand on the other horn, and you tip the animal over, right? Well, as he came off the horse, the steer turned his head and gored him, put the horn into his chest. The rib cage kept the horn out of his chest cavity, but it went right underneath his pec all the way to his sternum and back out. And so he had a great big scar where it had gone in, but the bones had kept it out of his lungs. So he was fine. They just rinsed it out and stitched him up, and he was, it's no big deal. So stuff like that. But then I had a really scary case. Had it was a practice punt return with a high school football team. And the guy returning the ball was just a monster. He was a big dude. And this was just a team scrimmage. We weren't even playing another team yet. And he made it through everybody. And there was one person left that could stop him before he scored. And it was the kicker. And he was the smallest guy on the team. And that poor kid, he just ran up and kind of did like this and just got absolutely smeared by the kick return guy. And I went up there. He was kind of dazed and confused and started checking on him. He's doing all right. Well, I noticed he started getting kind of pale and like dizzy. And I'm like, you're going into shock. You've got something going on. And I immediately got on with 911 and said, I need an ambulance here. I've got somebody with some internal injuries. And he had actually ruptured his spleen in the tackle.
Oh my God.
And was bleeding out. And he was in the hospital for a week after that.
Wow.
So get some pretty wild injuries coming
so
up.
It's a good thing you acted quickly there.
Yeah, absolutely. If they told him just go sit down and have a glass of water, he would have passed out and could have died.
Wow.
So I would like to think somebody would have noticed he wasn't doing well, would have called for an ambulance. I'm sure they would have. Yeah. But that was a really spooky case. And I was glad we could get that handled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just because you brought up rodeos, have you ever do you ever do any rodeoing, or do you go to the rodeos? I was at a rodeo once, and we went on a long cross country trip. My parents took us when I was 11. We actually made our way into Montana briefly, but we went to a rodeo, and man, that is a wild thing. I mean, these people are getting thrown around by wild, or I don't know. Do you call it a wild animal? Maybe it's somewhere between.
They're not wild. They're the animals are athletes themselves. That's what they do. They're bred to do what they do. And when the rider gets tossed off, they relax. They're nice and calm. Those bulls, you can walk in the pens with them. They're not going to chase you down. They're not mad. They're really good athletes. Yes, I'm still involved in going out to rodeos. When I lived in Oregon, I was on a rodeo committee. We put on a rodeo and 4 nights of horse races in Prineville. So I was super involved with that. I haven't been as involved in Montana. I still attend the rodeos, but I did ride in one rodeo as a kid. Got it out of my system. I rode a sheep when I was, I think, 5. And I've got a great picture of Dad standing in the chute, me just gripping this ewe. Yeah. And Dad's got his hat and his members only jacket. And he's kicking me out the chute. And my eyes are huge and I'm holding on best I can. And I'm still bitter. I would have completed my ride, but the clown pulled me off. So I didn't get 8 seconds. I'm still upset about it. Yeah.
How long were you on the sheep for then?
Oh, I was probably only on 4 or 5 seconds.
Is that right? Are the sheep is it because you were young, or is the sheep they'll bust you?
Sheep are fast, really fast, and they're hard to hold on to.
Yeah.
And back when we did it, you had to sit upright and hold them with one hand, like the other rough stock riders, like bareback and saddle bronc and the bull riders. You have one hand to hold on.
And you gotta have the other hand up like this.
You tried, I'm sure I didn't do very good at that, but anymore, the kids, when they still do it, and it's the same rodeo, the old Helmville rodeo in Helmville, Montana, still puts kids on sheep. And it's funny, they come up with great names for the sheep. The kid's getting on Terminator this time, or the kid's getting on Steel Wool. They come up with all kinds of hilarious names, like the bulls are named. But the kids get to kind of grab on now and hold on. Back in my day, we rode them like men, one hand.
Yeah.
So,
well, back in those days, what was that? The 90s, the late 80s, maybe?
80. No, it would have been 1982.
82. All right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The whole total. So you're Gen X. So
right.
We were parented differently.
Yeah. So and I didn't get involved in rodeo growing up. There's definitely avenues for that. Kids can now grow up and start rodeoing pretty early. They have a mini bull program. They raise miniature bucking bulls for kids to get on in grade school and high school, very competitively. And then both of the state universities here, actually, there might be 3 or 4 of them, have rodeo teams. University of Montana has a rodeo team. Montana State Northern up in Havre has a rodeo team. I think University of Montana Western down in Dillon has a rodeo team. So they're pretty good collegiate wise. They've got very good rodeo teams. So it's a cultural thing. They grow up doing that.
Yeah.
And then they get into the professional levels and away they go.
Yeah, I could tell. Listen, one of the big things I wanted to ask you about, and I think as we've been talking here, you've said some things that make me think, that Yellowstone, the TV show, there's a fair amount of truth to that show. But one thing I want to ask you, first of all, do you watch Yellowstone?
Yeah.
You don't watch it at all?
I never have. I never have
seen an episode.
No. I've seen clips and friends tell me about it, but I'm torn. I want to watch it for the entertainment value, but I think I would get upset for all that they make up about ranching.
So clearly there's some stuff that's made up, right? Like I don't know what you've heard about the show, but
all of it.
All of it. But you just said you're in a bunkhouse, and they have a bunkhouse there,
They have a bunkhouse. We don't have a train station. The livestock agents can't.
That's what I was going to ask. Is that? But I feel like I've heard of that. Is that
we do have them? Yeah, we absolutely have them. Yeah. They're a law enforcement officer, just like anybody else. But they're restricted, just like any other law enforcement officer. They have to do an investigation, and there's a due process. They have to get through all that. So. No, it's definitely driven tourism to Montana. I met a nice couple from Texas last summer. I was up in the mountains checking our cows up on our BLM permit. We lease a bunch of ground from the BLM for summer grazing, and a couple of our cows had gotten out into the neighbor's lease, and I was walking through their cows, checking brands and trying to figure out where our bull was. And this couple pulls over with a car from a local guest ranch that lives up the road from us that entertains these type of guests. And they said they had come to Montana because they watched Yellowstone. They wanted to see it real life. And I happened to be out in the woods taking pictures of cows and looking at cows. They thought this was amazing that we just turn our cows loose and then we get all the cows back in the fall. We can find them again because those pastures are not fenced. They are free roaming. So we had a great discussion about what we do at the ranch, and we've kept in contact with them. Actually, I have since then. So I expect they'll come back next summer. They've talked about maybe even coming out to the ranch and seeing what a actual working cattle ranch does. Take the Hollywood out of it. I know we've had folks move here because of Yellowstone, not necessarily our valley, but places like Bozeman, Darby, down the Bitterroot where it's actually filmed. Certainly bringing folks in.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. I mean, especially during the pandemic, at the height of the pandemic in 2020, people were moving there like crazy. I was reading, Washington Post did a story on, people buying actually without ever having set foot or they would, like a real estate agent would do a Zoom walkthrough, but that was it. And they just plunk down money and then they'd move from like LA and New York and so forth.
Right.
Now, what's happened out there? Because one thing that struck me is I was like, these people have no idea what they're in for. Like they can't deal with that cold in the winter.
Right. Very true. Very true. They'll go buy property that doesn't have wintertime access. They have snowmobile in and out. We have a bunch of those homes that sold up actually where we spend our summers with the cows, that road is closed in the wintertime. They literally have to leave their vehicles at the highway and snowmobile up to their house every day to get out to work or out to medical appointments. You're snowmobiling for 5 or 6 miles in the dark. To find your way. So, but that's a lifestyle some folks like. What happened during COVID was that it became much easier for folks to work remotely. Businesses were forced to allow people to work remotely, and there was hesitation doing that originally because they wanted management control over their employees, and so that limited who moved to Montana. Well, even though we don't have cell service, we do have very good phone service and internet through that. So with COVID, folks figured out they could move wherever they wanted and live a lifestyle they wanted and work remotely. So we had a huge influx of people during COVID that were allowed to do that. Normally wouldn't have been. Finding work would have been very restrictive for them. Now they can. So that's worked out. We definitely do have folks buying property because of Yellowstone. And that really upset the people who moved here after watching river runs through it. Right. So there have been plenty of other shows that have portrayed this beauty of Montana, and here they come. But they do have to make a go of it. They've got to figure out how to drive the roads in the wintertime and deal with wildfires in the summertime. They want to have their home out in the boonies, out in the middle of the sticks, with all sorts of privacy. Well, when you have a wildfire come through, you better have prepared that ground for it, and so it doesn't burn your home down.
Yeah.
And they don't. They want it super thick and miserable and nasty because they can't see out. No one can see in. Well, that means their house is going to burn down. So
how do you prepare your home? How do you prepare your property for, you got to cut down trees? Is that what you're saying?
You gotta, thin the trees out. You don't have to cut them all down. We need the trees around, but wildfire naturally thinned the forest over time. And we've been putting fires out now for 120 years in this area. So our forests are terribly overgrown, unhealthily so. Normally a fire would come in every 15 to 30 years and burn a chunk of ground and thin it out. And the fire adapted species would survive. Your lodgepole and ponderosa and larch that can handle that would survive. They would get thinned out. Just like you plant a garden thick and then you come through when it gets to a certain height, you thin it out. Same thing with trees. But people have been so scared to log. Logging is just this horrible, terrible word. Well, if we're putting out wildfires, we need to be able to thin the trees some other way. And mechanically seems to be a good way of doing it. So we have a lot of programs through state grants and federal grants to go and thin those properties, make it a defensible space. Make sure you don't have firewood stacked up against your home that can catch embers. Make sure you don't have a wood shake roof that'll catch fire when embers fall. And we try to coach folks to think about what actually starts a home on fire in a wildfire. It's not the approaching fire front that catches the home on fire. It's the embers being blown out a half a mile ahead or a quarter mile ahead that land in a pile of pine needles on your roof that starts it burning. It's the embers falling in your lawn furniture, your fancy upholstery chairs out on your porch that catch fire, that catch your siding on fire, that catches your deck on fire, now your house burns down. So it's planning for some of those things, and it's providing for access for firefighters to safely come in and defend your property and be able to get back out again. If it's a narrow one-way road that I can't get my engine turned around, and if I have to leave very quickly, I'm not going to take the time to back out slowly. We're just going to drive by your house. We're not going to try to protect it because we might die trying.
Yeah.
And we're not going to put any more energy into your property than you did. So if you didn't do anything to defend it, I'm probably not either. Unless it's the last thing I have to do. We're going to go work with somebody who's actually tried to protect their home.
And you're saying a lot of these transplants coming in, they're just not doing that?
Absolutely not. They think logging is horrible, that we shouldn't cut any trees ever, and that they want that thick privacy. And that's an unhealthy forest. Forests aren't supposed to be thick and gnarly like that because it stunts the growth of the trees. It stunts the growth of the underbrush that feeds the deer and the elk that browse on all that. You get that heavy, dense timber, you don't have grass on the ground anymore. Now you don't have browsing for the deer and the elk and whatever else. So it needs to be thinned out either through fire or mechanically, whatever it is. So there are grants out there to help folks pay for that because it's expensive. You have to bring in equipment. You have to bring in a professional to do the work and not damage the soil, not damage the environment, but be able to do something with that wood. We have resources for moving that wood out to make pulp. There's a group in Bonner, just west of us, that chips a lot of those logs and a lot of that small timber that gets railed out to, I think it's supposed to maybe Longview, Washington, and makes toilet paper. It's pulp. So there's a use for those trees. Some folks chip them and just leave it as mulch on their property to help keep weeds down and put those nutrients back in the soil. So there's a lot of things you can do that you don't have to hardscape 300 feet out from your house and just have an exposed home in the middle of a parking lot. That's not right either. So adequately spacing trees and making sure you don't have fuels up against your house. And we are getting bigger and more miserable fires. We're getting fires now that reach into hundreds of thousands of acres. And that's a very difficult fire to fight. We don't fight it. We just try to catch things on the edge and you wait till wintertime. The snow puts it out. So we're having issues now with folks moving out here, buying these homes out in the timber, and the insurance companies are dropping their insurance because they don't have good protection around their homes. We're a volunteer department. There are ISO ratings for fire departments. If you're in a city, you're probably an ISO rating of 1 or 2, which means there's an adequate fire department with adequate water, with adequate staffing that will immediately respond and be at your home within 5 minutes, right? You have the best protection available. We're an ISO rating of 9 here in Potomac. A 10 means there's nothing. We're a step better than nothing. We're something. we're going to protect outbuildings. We're going to protect life. We're going to try to get that covered. But it's a sad joke, but we're going to save your foundation. But we're going to keep it from spreading into the neighborhood. We're going to keep it from spreading into your barn or out into your field, whatever it is. So there are homes getting dropped right now because the wildfire costs are just way too high for insurance companies to cover. So that's going to be a real issue for these folks moving out here. They're either going to have to self-insure or really shop hard trying to find a way to protect their homes and get them insured.
Yeah. And that's one of the themes on Yellowstone too, is just the people coming in, sort of the outsiders coming from, in Yellowstone, it's a lot of like corporate business interests coming in that want to build like a ski resort or something. But so there's a little truth to that then, because it seems like Yellowstone was ahead of this even before the pandemic. Like this was already a thing before, I think the pandemic really amplified it, but.
Yeah. And we do get that. People love to visit Montana. They have for decades. They were coming to Montana to visit in the 1800s. They loved it out here. Whether it was Yellowstone being the first national park or getting up to Glacier, wealthy East Coast elites coming out and buying up ranches for private guest events and their cool little cabins on the lake. That's been going on since the 1880s. Yeah. So this has been going on for a long time. They're buying up a piece of ground or buying a ski hill or buying a small lodge up on Holland Lake and trying to put some huge corporate retreat in there. And the community is trying to fight that right now up on Holland Lake. Yeah. They're fighting a corporation coming in and buying the lodge and turning it into some fancy private resort. The community doesn't want that. Weather has kept them out of Potomac for the most part, but anymore we can build houses so well and maintain roads so well that they do fine. They buy close.
And just to say, you're in Potomac, which is just describe where that is again. That's it's western Montana overall, but
western Montana. We are east of Missoula, about 20 miles.
Right.
So we're on Highway 200 on the Blackfoot River, between Missoula and Ovanda will be another town. We're at about 4,000 feet, 3,600 to 4,000 feet elevation. Wow. We're in the Garnet Range of the Rocky Mountains. So we're in nice, tall ponderosa and fir forest around us. So, that's where Potomac is.
Yeah. And so just to fully understand, you're not going to watch Yellowstone? Is that sort of where you are? Maybe someday, or?
I might watch it someday, but I'm not. I don't have a lot of time, and so I'm very specific, and I don't know how I want to say it. I don't like giving my time away, and so if I'm going to spend time doing something, it needs to be valuable to me. And right now, I don't find much attraction in watching Yellowstone. I have friends who watch it and absolutely love it. They say it's fantastic, and they understand it's entertainment. It's not real life. It is absolutely Hollywoodized. So I don't know. I may watch it someday. I've seen some of the clips. I have friends who have been extras in it. I have a number of friends.
Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So they put a lot of money into the community, whether it's Missoula County or down in Ravalli County, where the ranch, the Dutton Ranch, that sits down in, I think it's Darby is where that ranch is, but they spent a lot of money in Missoula. And now the different prequels are spending money in Montana. Was it 1923 is filming over in Butte. So it is definitely brought money into Montana. So Yellowstone inadvertently helped our fire department 2.5 years ago. We had a medical call for a CPR in progress. It was a cardiac event. And we get out to this property and there are camera crews and film trucks, and it looked like what we see with a big fire camp where you have catering trucks and tents and all kinds of things set up, and there's people running around all over. There's probably 150 people there where normally there's nobody. We had no idea what was going on, but we take care of the patient. They had a paramedic on scene. They were able to revive him, and he survived. We got a helicopter out of Missoula, flew him to town, and he survived. Well, they were filming another movie. J.K. Simmons was filming a movie. His wife is the producer of it, but he was is an actor in it. But it was filmed here in Potomac, and we hadn't heard about it. But they had hired a full-time, basically a movie paramedic to be on scene. And he was one of the guys from the Yellowstone program, because all these different crews were in Montana doing Yellowstone. They could snatch them up for doing smaller projects.
Yeah.
And so it was great. We had a paramedic who had started care immediately. As soon as the guy crumped, they could start taking care of him. That never happens. Never happens. So it helped on that particular call. Now, had they not been filming, we wouldn't have had the call. So I don't know, it is what it is. But there are other side projects going on around here that honestly helped Potomac. They rented some properties to stage and to film, and that movie hasn't been released yet.
Yeah. Do you know the name of it? What was that?
So the working movie was called The Woods, and I think it's now called You Can Run, But You Can't Hide, something like that. Yeah. But it's a J.K. Simmons film anyway. Yeah. So, but yeah, it's in post-production now. So that'll be fun to see. They filmed around here, shut roads down for a couple of days, and messed with the school bus because the road was closed while they were filming, and just little stuff. It was fine.
Yeah.
It was.
And you stay pretty up to date on what's going on, though. It seems like just in like entertainment and culture and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not that backwards. We're not that bad.
No, I didn't mean to suggest that at all, but I just
No, when I lived in Oregon, I was with a group of folks that were pretty active on social media early. They were pretty early adopters of Twitter. I started making contacts on that many years ago. Matter of fact, I'm super close with a couple who met on Twitter. They met me. He's from North Dakota. She's from California. They ended up getting married up in Big Fork, Montana. It was kind of halfway between the two families, and I performed the ceremony for them. And it was all because of Twitter. Yeah, we're super close with them out in North Dakota now. So, we're still connected. It's just maybe a little slower. I don't have such instant knowledge coming in. I'm maybe an hour or two behind that there's a new balloon flying over. But I hear about it. I'll get there eventually.
Yeah, so, for sure.
Yep.
And that's interesting. I noticed too that you used to be a little more active on Twitter, but it seems like you're not doing much on Twitter anymore. What do you think? Like, what do you make of Elon Musk buying Twitter? Did you start drawing back your activity there before that, or?
I started ratcheting back well before that, when Twitter turned away from something that was interesting and knowledgeable and people helping each other out to just a place where people went to complain and argue and fight. I just didn't get value from it anymore. Early on, I was connecting with a pretty large agricultural community on Twitter, which is actually what helped me gain the confidence to move back to the ranch. It really was seeing all these other young producers going back to the farm or back to the ranch that were active on social media, were posting, this is what I'm doing. I'm learning about this today. I'm going to this class, or having troubles with this cow. What do I do? So there was a really large support network on Twitter originally. And I think they're still there. It's just so thinned out with all the people who just want to hear themselves talk. And I just didn't find much value in Twitter anymore. So I still have the account. I haven't done much with it. Once in a while, I'll post like one of those weather pictures. Somebody wants to see that so they can get reposted. Or National Weather Service anymore. My co-op observer director tends to post more of the pictures now. So he'll handle that for me. But I've been more involved, I guess, on Instagram, Facebook, keeping up with friends, whatever it is. We have a ranch Facebook page. It's fun to post some things, but I get more out of Instagram anymore. So it's out there.
And do you think that obviously Elon Musk buying Twitter back in late October, things have changed somewhat there in that month, and depending on who you talk to, for the worse, for the better, it's hard to say. But do you anticipate coming back to Twitter a little bit more?
I know there are a lot of folks moving back, and I haven't spent the time going back through and deciding if I want to start doing that again. It's hard because I'm not connected all the time to be able to post. So, keeping up during the day is a little hard for me because I'm out of service for so long. But I may go back. I think it's great that somebody's bought it. Hopefully they can keep attracting people to it, and it could be a decent platform. But for so much, it was just about arguing, and I didn't have time for that. My time is valuable. I would rather be doing something else, learning a new, I don't know, maybe it's taking a class on beef quality assurance where I'm learning how to be a better rancher, learning a different skill set. I only have so much time during the day.
Yeah.
I had mentioned earlier that we all work off the ranch, and we always have. My dad and uncle had a logging business while they ran the ranch. They've since sold that. My wife works off the ranch. My cousin's a physician in Missoula. Her husband's retired from the Army, but he works for a contractor out of his home. I work for the local school district. I'm the maintenance janitor guy for Potomac School. So that takes up a lot of my time during the day after I leave the ranch. Yeah. So I don't have a lot of spare time. And I don't know. I may look back at it. We'll see. I've got some friends who are still involved in Twitter, and I may go back to it.
Yeah, but just was curious.
It's got to bring something into my life for me to spend some time on
it. Yeah, I understand. Hey, I know we're getting kind of long, and we'll wrap up in a minute, but I wanted to ask you too, looking at your Instagram, I noticed a lot of times you'll be doing, so it seems like herding, like you're moving the cows, the cattle, and it's a lot of times you're using your pickup truck.
Go ahead and take a left there, ladies, if you would. You're supposed to be following me. Well, good girls. Good girls. Get them trained.
Everything is better with some cows around. Living in town sometimes brings me down. Let me bestow this western blessing and share what I have found.
And that was one thing in Yellowstone. They're always on horses and like lassoing and whatnot. And in your little videos, it's like the truck is moving and the cows are just following along. Is that? Tell me about it. Do you have horses, or is it just easier to use the truck?
We have horses, but the horses are for the grandkids to ride. We've got some old, wore out trail horses that are safe for kids, and they learn how to ride a horse. My dad had a horse. My uncle had a horse. I grew up riding, but I've never owned a horse. I don't use horses for moving cows. Most of the time we can move cows leading them with a pickup with some hay in the back, or a tractor with a round bale on the back, and they'll follow to feed. Our cows are also trained to come to voice. We have a call that will bellow out there that'll get their attention, especially during fall gather up in the mountains. We can call, that'll echo down the different draws and valleys, and they'll call back to us, and they'll start coming. So
is that right? How do you train them to do that? Is that something you do right from birth?
Years.
They pick it up?
Over the years, it's just consistent training. It was something my grandfather did when he had his dairy back in Minnesota. When it came time to milk cows, they would go out and call for them, and the cows would come in. And so they just kept that up. And I suppose it's like training a dog. You make a sound when you're doing something that they like. So when you're feeding, you make that noise. They associate that noise with feeding. There's ranchers out in eastern Montana who will drive out with a truck, and they have a siren on it, like a fire siren. And the cows know when they hear that, they should come running because something cool is happening. They're getting some feed, they're getting a treat, they're getting some hay, or it's time to move. And so we just consistently do that. We call and the cows come. We have four-wheelers and pickups. We can go gather. In the fall up in the mountains, it is handy to have a horse. Because you're trying to keep up with cows walking through the timber and over downfall, and we'll have neighbors who will come ride for us. So when we need to, we have enough neighbors with horses that we'll bring them in, and they'll think it's fun. They get to cowboy for a day. But I don't know how to rope. I can throw a rope, but I don't know if I can rope a calf. I don't really need to. In the summer, when they're out on open range and we have a sick calf, let's say they hurt a foot or get a foot infection, we use a dart gun and be able to load a treatment. If it's an antibiotic, if the vet says that's what we need to do to treat them, we get within 30 yards and we can dart them. And we don't have to rope them and tie them up and have to give them a shot. We can do that remotely. So that's been really good for us. So we'll do that. But around the ranch, we can call them and they come running.
Yeah, say no if you want, but can you do that call right now, like so people can hear it? If you're self-conscious, you don't have to, but
So it's it's 2 words. It's come boss. So, and boss that's an old term for a cow, right? The Latin term is bos taurus. For our breed of cattle, there's bos indicus. That's the cattle that came out of India, like Brahmins, the big swaddling necks and big humps. That's bos indicus. Ours are bos taurus. So boss or bossy cow is kind of an old term for a cow. So it's come boss. But it's come boss. Yeah, my dog just jumped. So, and that's quiet. Usually it's very loud. If you need it to carry out through the timber, it's much louder. I don't know if I can do it. My voice is a little hacked up from drinking my tea here, but come boss.
And then they come running.
And they see my dog just came to that. She knows something's up.
So your dog.
So, but when we do the cows, they'll start calling back. And they reply to it and come running and because they think they're getting moved. The cows think the grass is always greener on the other side. That's where that term came from. They think something has to be better, even though as good as they have it where they're at, something has to be better. And so they're always wanting to move. And so that's a cue for them that something is happening. It's fun. So you can move cattle pretty easily.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I got interviewed 10 years ago through a contact through Twitter. A guy was writing a book on the book's called The Terrible Two. Mac Barnett is the author. And Mac's he has a series of books about these, I think they're brothers or friends anyway, that get into hijinks and do pranks. And he had reached out through a Twitter contact when I was more active on Twitter that, hey, I'm writing this book and these kids need to move a bunch of cows. How would they do that? And a librarian that I followed out of East Coast followed him and got a hold of me. And so we had a phone call and I went out into the pasture and called and he wrote it into the book.
That's amazing.
So
he was doing research.
He was doing his research for a children's book on how he would move cows. And the whole point was these guys moved a bunch of cows in the middle of the night into the school. So it was pretty funny. So it's fun. And it's a Scandinavian thing. The Scandinavians have moved animals by voice for a long time. You'll find videos on Kulning, Kulning. And it's a different sound, but it's the same technique, same idea. Yeah. Where you're getting to come to voice. So
that's interesting.
Fun.
And a couple other things. So the type of cows too. Remind me what type of cows you have.
So we have primarily Red Angus genetics. They're red cows. Red Angus with some Simmental cross or Gelbvieh cross. Gelbvieh is a Swiss breed. So the reason we run cross and we don't run registered is that our whole job with these calves is to get them to gain weight. That's what we're paid on. We're paid on weight. And so everything we do has to be to really focus on them gaining. We calve a little bit later so that they're not so stressed in February and not gaining weight. They start gaining weight immediately. We wean them a little bit later. We keep them on the cows a little bit longer. We feed them better so that they're gaining weight. And like I said, when we wean them, and that's how we get paid is based on weight. So everything we have to do is focused on that. So the cattle, when you hybridize and cross 2 different strains of cattle, that hybrid calf will grow better and be healthier than its parent. And you'll see this often in purebred dogs where they start having genetic problems because they're so inbred and they don't have a lot of genetic variation to them. They have problems. But a mutt never gets sick and lives forever.
Yeah.
Same thing in cattle. It's called hybrid vigor. When we cross what's called a continental breed, so a breed that came from the continent of Europe, and cross them with a British breed, an Angus, we get a super healthy, really strong, vibrant hybrid calf, that first generation cross. And so that's something we want. We can get a lot of extra weight gain just by the fact that we cross those breeds. And so most commercial cattle are crossbred like that. You'll see folks talking about, I run registered cattle, purebred cows. Well, that's because they're trying to sell the genetics. They're trying to sell that particular line of bulls or cows that they sell to us. I buy those bulls. I breed my cows. I get a calf that then I wean and sell to a backgrounding lot somewhere who feeds them for 3 or 4 months, that then sells them to a finishing lot that feeds them until they're 1,400 pounds, and then they go to the slaughter plant. They go to the food supply. So, and there are folks who are integrated and do all of those steps. They have registered animals, they have the seed stock, they have the commercial cow-calf operation, they have the feedlot. That's a big project, and it's a lot of different moving parts, and it's a very large time commitment because you're 18 months into an animal. Whereas I'm roughly 6 months into these calves, and then it's somebody else's problem. I start over again. So yeah, that's why we have that particular cross. It works well for our ground. They work well in the mountains, and we buy our genetics from Montana producers whose cattle are proven to be able to handle our weather, our extreme cold, and the mountains.
Yeah, and then they go on and become steaks and burgers and all that sort of stuff. Is that right? I mean, I know you post a lot too about eating beef. So
they do. So those calves then go into the slaughter plant and get processed for steaks, roasts, ground beef, whatever it is. We do finish a couple of cattle a year on the ranch, primarily for ourselves. We like to eat beef. We keep back the small calves, generally the ones that were born too late to make the truck and get sold. So we keep those back for ourselves. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe it's cross-eyed or there's something the buyer didn't like. We keep those ones back, and those are the ones that we eat.
Yeah.
But we also have to do something with those cows that aren't producing calves anymore. And so a few years back, we got licensed by the state to sell beef direct to consumer. And so I have an inspected freezer inspected by the Department of Livestock. They come out every year and make sure that my record keeping is good, and that my meat is being processed at an inspected facility, a state inspected facility, and we sell ground beef off the ranch. We don't sell steaks, anything like that, because we're generally keeping back those older cows that are done calving, and they just don't make a tender steak. Yeah. So they make really good burgers. So all of those different cuts then go into the ground beef. It is absolutely fantastic ground beef because you're getting the chuck and the sirloin and the New York strip and the tenderloin. All of that goes into the burger. It's absolutely fantastic. So they go into a feedlot here at the ranch where they get all the hay and alfalfa they want. And then we also grow barley as part of our crop rotation here for our weed management. And so they get a ration of barley on top of that, which makes a really nice cut of beef. They marble up well, which then gets ground, but it makes for really good flavored beef. And we have a pretty strong group of buyers who come in and can buy a burger a pound at a time out of the freezer at the ranch. Yeah. So, and once in a while, we'll have a young cow who loses a calf, but she's young enough that can be butchered. And so we'll then have a half or a quarter or a whole animal to sell that will be steaks and roasts and all that, whatever the customer wants.
Yeah. And, it made me think about just everything you're talking about, where the weather that they live in and so forth, and then that they go on to the Midwest. I'm wondering is there a way for somebody when they go to the supermarket to know if the beef came from Montana versus somewhere like Texas? And is there any difference in the taste? Is it going to taste a little different because it came from Montana versus Texas?
Well, I'm going to say there's a difference, but you're not going to notice it at the grocery store. You're not going to see it at the grocery store unless it's a particular branded beef. Our beef just goes into the commercial food chain. There's no listing that's Montana, no listing that's Iverson Ranch. We're small. We don't have the volume to be able to market that. You will see Myers Natural Angus. That's a ranch to the east of us that does have a very large national marketing program. You'll find Myers Natural Angus, Myers beef in the grocery stores, and that's Blackfoot Valley beef. They raise red Angus just like us. They're just on the other side of the hill from us here. So there is some of that, but unless it's a particularly branded program, you're not going to see that. Yeah. There were some efforts to do some specific Montana branding, Montana branded beef. The consumers weren't that interested in it 15 or 20 years ago when they tried it, but now there may be more push for that.
There might be some real interest in that nowadays.
And we're not big enough that we can ship or have an online presence. It's literally coming to the ranch with a cooler and buying it. We'll get out and sell it to you a pound at a time. I do have a nice little Asian store in Missoula that buys some of my offcuts, tongues, tails, and shanks. for some specialty meats that their customers want out of there. So, matter of fact, I just made one of the recipes last night. I posted a picture of Balalo. It's
I think I saw that.
beef.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beef shake. It's the forearm of the beef that's cut into thin slices, and then you cook it up, and it's fantastic. It's great. I had to try it. But he'll buy every bit of that I can produce, and it moves quick out of his store.
So you're saying though too, you could tell the difference. You have like sort of a refined enough palate to tell the difference between steak that came from Montana versus Texas, let's say.
I don't know that I can tell the difference between a Montana steak and a Texas steak. I can tell the difference between grain-fed, grass-fed. They have different flavors. They have different taste. They have a different mouthfeel. You have to cook them differently. I think ours is pretty good. We've never had a problem selling our calves. Montana cattle are very hardy and they're very healthy. And so we get a premium because our cattle come from Montana. Those cattle drives used to bring cattle from Texas up to Montana because of our grasses, our really healthy, high protein grasses. And so the cattle buyers out in the Midwest like getting Montana cattle because we bump up the overall average of their herd health because we have such strong cattle up here. They take a little bit longer to grow because it's so darn cold. They take a little bit longer, but they finish out great, absolutely finish well. So I'm partial to our beef. I'm very picky. I really do not like going and getting steak at restaurants because I'm picky, very picky.
And what's your favorite cut? What, like if you're going in, like, or let's say not you're going in, but any cut of meat, what are you making? Like,
I love a ribeye, but you can't eat ribeye all the time. There's a lot of calories in a chunk of ribeye, but boy, it's a good eating steak. My test though at a steak shop or steak restaurant is sirloin. It's really easy to mess it up and to make it tough. And so I'm testing the skills of their chef and how they're cooking it, how they're preparing it, making sure the temperature's right. But that they're also selecting good meat ahead of time. If you start with bad meat, it just doesn't get better. Yeah. So that's my test. If I'm checking out a new place, I'll grab a sirloin. It's easy to cook a ribeye. There's all kinds of marbling. It's going to be tender. It's going to be tasty. Unless it comes up from some dried up old dairy cow that's miserable, that's not going to be a good eating experience. But otherwise, ribeye, that's easy. That's super easy to not overdo it. Yeah. But sirloin, you got to have some skills to make sure you don't screw it up. So anyway, that's my test. But I also, because I live on a ranch, I have a lot of beef. I like some variety. I'll go order fish. I'll get something different, get some yard bird, get some chicken once in a while. And because I raise beef, I'm very particular in how I like it cooked and processed and whatnot. But I like wild game too. I have a freezer full of moose. So
moose that you shot yourself?
No. So in Montana, it's legal to pick up roadkill. And
yes, I've heard about that.
Yeah. So you have to be careful with it. You got to make sure it's not damaged, right? Yeah. But being on the fire department, we got paged out to a vehicle versus moose crash, which are not uncommon. We don't have a lot of moose here. So crashes happen. And when they do, that's a very large animal that does a lot of damage to a vehicle and had left the vehicle stranded in the middle of the road. So the fire department gets paged out, and there's a moose laying on the shoulder that had been in the valley all summer raising some calves. It was a young cow moose. And she was kind of partially in the lane, the oncoming traffic lane. The vehicle that was in the crash was damaged, incapacitated. It was in the middle of the other lane, but the driver had left, had gotten a ride, hitchhiked out, and was gone. So we hurried up and wanted to move this moose. Well, one of my friends who's on the fire department is also a mechanic, tractor mechanic, and has a great big truck with a crane. And so we lifted that thing up and put it right in the bed of my truck. And when we got done with the call, then we went home and printed up the license real quick. It's a free permit. You just have to register it. Yeah. And then I took her to a licensed butcher shop who then went through it and cut out all the damage. So I wasn't eating rotten meat. I wasn't eating busted up meat with bone chunks in it. They kept what was good. And there was still 300 pounds of meat off that moose.
Wow.
So she didn't go to waste. And it's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
Moose is good. You like it? Yeah.
Oh, moose is great. Yeah. And we'll get cars versus elk fairly frequently. And when we're up on the call, if a car is disabled and there's an elk laying there, we'll start texting folks, hey, there's a fresh elk at mile marker, whatever, and folks will start coming. and pick it up. Deer, people really don't pick up because there's just not much to them, and they sustain a lot of damage. But a bigger animal like a moose or an elk, absolutely, people will pick those up, and they'll do a good job. It's not like you're eating the rotten, bloated roadkill that stinks. It's something fresh, like it's still bleeding. It's that fresh, so it's okay. It's fine. It's clean.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, by doing that, we're not attracting scavengers to the highways. We have fewer eagles getting hit. We have fewer coyotes and bears and things getting hit because the carcasses are getting picked up. So the state picks them up when they can, and they haul them to a compost facility. We have a wild game compost facility up the road that the DOT operates. And then we have another portion of that facility that is for composting domestic animals. So earlier we were talking about the flagery and the range riders for reducing predator conflict. One of the things that we do, every cow dies eventually, right? Every animal dies eventually. You have to do something with that. It used to be we would just go dump them in a pit up on a remote corner of the ranch, and the coyotes would come in and scavenge, and the bears would come in. Well, we were teaching these predators that beef is really delicious. And when they run out of a dead animal, well, they might go pick off one of your live ones. And so we were just attracting predators onto the ranch.
Yeah, you're giving them a taste for beef.
Giving them a taste for it, and you're serving it up on a platter. So the last number of years, and it's been well since before I came home, we have a partnership then with the DOT and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks, a bunch of different conservation groups, to put together a domestic animal compost facility. So all of our dead cows and dead calves then go up to this compost facility. They get mixed with some wood chips and some water, and they can cook a cow down about 90 days. And then they'll make a screen compost that then can go back out onto the farmland. And it's got a 10,000 volt electric fence around it, and it keeps predators out. And we're not attracting them to the ranches anymore. So we've got some really neat programs and partners who don't normally partner with agriculture to reduce predator conflict. There's some different wolf and bear organizations that pay money to help fund this. So we're reducing conflict and not going out and just killing every wild animal that comes onto the place.
Yeah. And not only that, but if you let's say you get 300 pounds of moose, even if you divide that up 3 ways with your buddies, like how long does that keep you, I'm assuming you're freezing that and you're eating for like a year probably, right?
Yes, you're eating for a long time. So I split that up and shared with a lot of the folks who went on that particular call. They all got some meat, but, or folks in the community who watched that cow raise her calves. Unfortunately, those calves probably didn't make that winter. They weren't old enough to be weaned yet. So, it was a sad deal, but there's something positive came out of it anyway. But it all goes back to, I love eating beef, but I love some variety too, for sure.
Yeah. And what's the perfect temperature to have your steak cooked at?
I usually take mine to 125, 130. I really like smoking it low and slow on my pellet grill, and then I'll crank the heat and roast it quick and finish it off. I like it medium rare all the way through, rare to medium rare, depending on the cut.
Same.
So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, anymore, and it's over.
Yep, absolutely.
Let me ask you this. I'm gonna share my screen again. This is from your Instagram. I know. Maybe right. And if you don't like this, I'll cut it out. But I thought it was funny, so
I can do it. I posted it publicly. All
right.
Yes.
See that? All right, so what's going on here? It says huevos for dinner. I'm not sure. I have an idea what this might be, but why don't you just explain it?
Yep. Those are the testicles off a whitetail buck that I shot.
Off a buck. Okay.
Yeah, off a whitetail buck. I was fortunate to take a really, really nice buck off the ranch a few years back. I was in the right place at the right time. And I try not to let things go to waste. And as a kid growing up on the ranch, we castrated all of our calves. A steer adds and gains more weight and is more tender than a bull. And so we always castrated the calves and cut them, and you would have a big calf fry after that, right? Rocky Mountain oysters. And anymore, we don't cut the calves. We use rubber bands that go around the scrotum, and they dry up and fall off. We have much less chance of infection. But anyway, I grew up eating Rocky Mountain oysters. and just kind of on a dare. I'm like, I wonder how they are off a whitetail buck. They were fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So hold on a second. I thought that was a bit of a myth, the Rocky Mountain oyster thing. You're saying
No.
it's 100% real.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're delicious.
Really?
You peel the membrane off and fry them up. Yeah, they're really
Fry
good.
them. That's how you have them. Fry them. Yeah.
Yeah, fry them up. Some of the old timers would just heat them up on the branding iron or the branding table when you were like fresh off the animal. Just cut them, throw it on the fire, cook it up, and just eat it right there. We never did that, but you'd collect them up and have friends over, and it was kind of just a fun thing to do. Once a year, you'd have a testy festy fish, testicle fry. Matter of fact, there was a bar and lodge up in Rock Creek that had an annual testicle festival. It was like 4 or 5 days long, and that's all they did. They bought them from the big packing plants. They keep them, but they were the large bull testicles. They'd slice them up and fry them up, and it was a reason to get drunk and eat testicles. But calf fries, Rocky Mountain oysters, they're fantastic. So I kept them off that buck, and they were great.
Yeah.
They were really tasty. Yeah, my wife even ate them. She thought it was great.
Really?
So I suppose it's all in how you prepare it. But
yeah, sure.
I've never shot a bull elk, so I don't know what they would be like. But a whitetail buck living on our field, eating alfalfa, nice and fat. It was good.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, this has been an amazing conversation, Joe.
You've been digging deep on my Insta.
Yeah, well, you put so much there, and like I said, it's fascinating to look at. Honestly, you could get lost on that page for a while. So we should actually, I'll put it on the screen, but get people should follow you because it's just interesting, and I think especially for people like me who grew up on the East Coast and have lived on the East Coast, or if they live on the West Coast and they don't get to see this way of life too often, I think it's really cool. So
yeah. Thank you. I try to share what's real out here. You know, I'm not creating some, false, persona on there. Like, this is what's going on. This is what we do.
Yeah. And that's
doing whatever.
I think that totally comes through, with what you do on your page and so forth. That comes through, and it's just a unique window into your life. I'm glad you do it, first of all.
Excellent. Thanks.
And it's really cool. And you're doing a lot of things. You fish. I can see you fish a lot. You hunt.
Yep.
So it's all super interesting. But you know what I wanted to actually finish on was another thing that you posted, which I thought was really interesting. You posted at some post, maybe it was a couple of years ago or something, a John Steinbeck quote about Montana. And just how I wanted to get to it here, but we sort of touched on it, tangentially, but really, obviously Montana is very beautiful. They call it big sky country.
Right.
It really is. I mean, it looks that way when I'm watching on Yellowstone, and when I was there, I remember noticing it too. But I'll read that quote here. It says, it seems to me that Montana is a great splash of grandeur. The scale is huge, but not overpowering. The land is rich with grass and color, and the mountains are the kind I would create if mountains were ever put on my agenda. How did you come across that quote, and why did it speak to you?
I'd read the book Travels with Charlie, which was about Steinbeck going through Montana, and that quote stuck with me. There are certain Montana quotes that are very common. They talk about being in love with Montana, and love is hard to define when you're in it. But I really like that Steinbeck one. It hadn't been used that I had seen often. And so it was something fun to throw out. And I think that was a picture of the cows. Yeah. If I remember right, they're coming across the prairie up in Ovando, up on our permit up there, on our lease, summer lease. They were coming across. It was a neat picture. We had a photographer come through who did a bunch of photos for fun for herself, and it just kind of all struck me. It came together that, man, that really hit, because we were in the grasslands, but the mountains were behind. Like, it was absolutely perfect. And we don't run our cows up there anymore because that is so full of grizzly bears. It was dangerous to be in there, and we lost calves and just didn't pencil for us. But I'm in love with Montana. Absolutely am. It's a pretty amazing place. You've got tough people who can handle the weather. It's gorgeous. It'll throw a lot of tough things at you, but if you can make it, man, it's a great spot to be. Really great spot to be. And it's like that for a lot of reasons. It's agriculture is keeping the land open. A lot of the ranches here in the valley have conservation easements, which means they'll never be subdivided. This landscape, this viewscape out here will always look like this. It'll always be open meadows. So that's important to me. You get to places like Missoula or down the Bitter, and it's all chunked up into little 5-acre pieces and parcels. And boy, I like this open space. But Montana is also varied in its landscape. It can be granite rocky peaks. It can be lush meadows. It can be wide open sagebrush flats. You can get in the Missouri River breaks, absolutely tough country. You can get on big water on Flathead in the Missouri. You can get into Glacier Park. You can get into Yellowstone. And Montana is just a great, great spot to be if you can make a go of it, if you can make it work. And for me, it's family legacy for being here. So I like sharing it. I like talking about it and helping folks enjoy it as well.
Yeah. Well, that's great, Justin. And it was very fun talking to you about all of this, and fun following you on Instagram too. And so I recommend everyone do it, anyone who may watch this. But thanks for taking the time to chat with me today, and keep posting, and also keep your eye on the sky. If you see any of the
yes, I will look.
Weird things flying around up there, try to snap a photo of that, post it on Instagram.
I will. We'll see. It sounds like we've got more of them coming, so it might happen. But thanks for asking questions. Thanks for taking an interest in it. I like to share. Ranchers tend to be all stoic and quiet and don't like to share what we do. But I think for folks to help folks understand what we do and why we do, and why I think we need to continue being on the landscape, I like to share the story and talk about what we do. So they see that, our food doesn't come from some nameless, faceless source in the middle of nowhere. There's legitimate people working on the ground to make sure this gets on your table. So I like to talk about it.
No, it's great. I think you're a great ambassador for ranchers, and there may be more out there that I haven't seen. I know I've seen a few others on Twitter. I feel like you're sort of, the best one I've seen at doing all this, and just, showing what the life is like. So yeah, keep it up. And awesome. I'm happy to ask questions. It's super interesting. I'm absolutely different from the way I grew up. So
sure. Very good. Thank you.
Interesting to hear. So thanks for taking the time. I really appreciate it, Justin.